welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Just so nice to see everybody here. And can we just have a quick agreement right at the beginning? We're going to do a lot of interaction with you, ladies and gentlemen. So if some of you who are hiding there at the back would just sort of, grab their stuff and come a little bit forward. I know this is just right at the moment how it looked at my university. And yes, I would have been at the back, but maybe just sort of for communication's sake, it would be nice if you could come forward, only as a suggestion. And when I say I'm really happy to be with you here and looking at what we're going to be talking about bio-based products and solutions, of course, what would be the alternative? Well, the alternative would be, of course, Dubai, except that I'm really happy not to be there. One of 70,000 to 120,000, we're not quite sure, and a lot of talk, little result. This session, ladies and gentlemen, is about digging a bit deeper, finding some solutions, maybe not reinventing the wheel, but turning it a little bit further. And as opposed to what UN General Secretary Antonio Guterres said, the world is failing to get to grips. I think we can actually drive the idea of the bioeconomy and taking it to consumers, taking it also to the administrators and rules and regulation makers here in Brussels a step further. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have a fantastic panel. We have a great keynote speaker. They're all sitting there to start the conversation with you. But let's just establish all my Slido questions, and I know that you've already exercised that in the opening session. All these, in this particular session, are going to be multiple choice, and they're all coming from you. So I'm not giving you any notions, and you will have a long time to actually punch in your answers. Now, my first question that I have for you, and that you will have the whole keynote to substitute and to fill up, is what are the main hurdles to faster deployment of bio-based products? I believe that you all know how to use Slido. You've already done this a little bit earlier, and we'll just leave you with this. So continue the next 10 minutes. It's going to be a great ride. Now, in preparation for this session, and in preparation, of course, for the next two sessions that I'm happy to moderate. My name is Conny, by the way. I think I've been introduced as a moderator and a journalist. I read a beautiful quote, and it's not one of those sort of lying out the top hurdle, but it's just saying the bioeconomy is considered to be the economy which gradually and sustainably emancipates itself from fossil fuels to rely on renewable resources derived from biomass. One definition, and we're talking about work in progress. We're actually going to be starting with a solution that is using something that we all try to get rid of, which is carbon. And we do not just need a bridge, but we need to find solutions and ways and means in which we can use carbon, but in a positive way. Up to now, carbon has only been sort of in the last 10 years got really bad PR. Now, the lady who's going to share her solution, respectively the solution of LanzaTech, her company that she is Vice President Europe of, is going to bring closer to us that using carbon is definitely one of the solutions, and everything else is, of course, up to you, Babette Pettersen. Babette has a long-standing experience in all things chemical. She started with the, let me say, classical process at DSM. She was early stage leader in synthetic biology, and then she moved into the startup scene, i.e. those that we all derive all the innovations from, or many of the innovations from, and you've worked for Ginkgo Bioworks, BioAmber, and now, of course, with LanzaTech. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I need you to applause and get Babette up on stage.
Thank you, Conny. Just find the first slide. Well, while we're finding the first slide, I will start by thanking the CBEJU for the opportunity to share an update on LanzaTech. As Conny said, it's really a story. We have to go back now. There we go. It's really an opportunity to tell a story, but it's just one example of the many new technologies that have been developed in the BBIJU, as we heard earlier on, and to be developed in the CBEJU going forward. I like the fact that Katja said earlier on, we need a multiplicity of solutions. I do want to emphasize before I tell the LanzaTech story, there is no one story, there is no one silver bullet here. We need multiple solutions to reach the very ambitious targets we have for both 2030 and 2050. So I'll provide a high-level overview of LanzaTech for those of you who are not familiar with our story. It's about two things. The first one is capturing carbon, as Conny just said, and the other part is creating value. And while there are many technologies out there today that do capture carbon, I think what's a little unique about what we do at LanzaTech is first and foremost that not only do we capture the carbon, we transform it using biology and naturally occurring bacteria and fermentation, a bioprocess, to transform the carbon from the gases into products, everyday products that we use. So I think a picture speaks 1,000 words, and what I'm trying to show by this picture here, if it's big enough for you to see, is the fact that all these products on the right-hand side here, whether it's the Gucci fragrance, the H&M outfit, the Sunlight liquid detergent from Unilever, these are products that have been launched on the market using carbon captured from emissions. So I'm sad that our commissioner is not here to see all the many products that are actually commercial today. So what do we use as a resource? Carbon as a resource, but not any carbon, and not generally typically the bio-based carbon that is used in the BBIJU and will be used in the CBEJU, but typically carbon from industrial emissions, from energy-intensive industries like steel, but not only. On the bottom, what you see there is we also can use the carbon from the gasification of solid waste and residues. We have a project in Japan with Sekisui where they're taking 20 tons a day of municipal solid waste from Tokyo. That is gasified, and we take the syngas from that gasification process and transform it with fermentation with our process into ethanol. They then have a partnership with Sumitomo to transform that ethanol into ethylene, made from carbon recycled from municipal solid waste. As you can see on the bottom there, there's also wood waste. That's obviously 100% biogenic carbon, other industrial waste, and we've worked in the UK with a government program there to take CO2 from direct air capture, which is obviously very popular with our policymakers, and shown that we can use the carbon from direct air capture combined with green hydrogen to produce the same products as we do today. So abundant source of waste, number one. Point source, which is basically the emitters, low cost in terms of a feedstock, and obviously no use of arable land or competition with food. So this is the process. The box in the middle there is effectively the boundary of the LanzaTech process. So it is at the heart of the process, and at the heart of our process is a bioreactor. Several bioreactors, typically, as you'll see in the plants that are commercial today, and that is where we inoculate the biocatalyst, as we call it, the naturally occurring bacteria, feed it with nutrients and minerals, and it grows and produces ethanol through the fermentation process with the carbon from those sources on the left-hand side, whether they be industry, waste, solid waste, or direct air capture. And on the right-hand side are all the applications that we've developed to date. So mainly on the top right-hand side, LanzaTech started out as a fuels company, so road transport, aviation, marine fuels. And on the bottom right, you basically see everyday products, textiles, household cleaning products, fragrances, and others. And to be honest, we did not design to be or strategize to be a consumer goods company. The market came to us. And that is because we are in Europe, and the market in Europe has some very ambitious targets, which it appears that the global brands have adopted. In the middle there, you see that spiral. That's basically spent carbon or spent biomass. When we clean out the bioreactor, we dry the spent biomass, and it's used in China as a supplement to animal feed. In Europe, there's going to be other purposes. So, as we heard this morning, and as we all know, there are a lot of great technologies out there. The second challenge, once you've developed a great technology, is get it to scale, because without scale, you are not relevant. And one of the reasons I joined LanzaTech after quite some time in different startups in bio-based chemicals, synthetic biology, was to see how LanzaTech had achieved commercial scale. So it happened in China in 2018, and people often ask us the questions, why China? Well, many reasons. One is that they actually flare their gases today because there aren't the same regulations that are in Europe. And as we all know, they have significant air quality problems. And also, they are actually quite risk takers, and they're in for a good business. So they really went into this to generate new revenue streams for their business. It happened to be a steel mill in 2018 in Shaogang, the steel company, and since that time, two other plants have been built, and a third will be built by the end of this year in different parts of China. So we'll have about 200,000 tons of ethanol in China produced from carbon that's captured from emissions from steel mills. And this is a very exciting year, particularly for Europe. 3 new plants, one in India, capturing carbon from refinery off-gases, another plant in China, and right in the middle there, we have a plant here in Europe, first plant in Europe at ArcelorMittal in Ghent, in Belgium. That's what the plant looks like. People often ask me, how do you actually capture the gas? Well, if you look at that orange pipe in the front there, it comes from the steel mill. It takes the gas, the emissions, and brings it into this facility, which really is just a rendition of the diagram I showed you earlier on. You can see those 4 large bioreactors. If you drive along the road in the Ghent port, they're very visible, and now that the weather's bad, they've got nice lights on them. Basically, the gas goes into a compressor, is compressed, then cleaned up, fed into the bioreactors, separated out, and distilled. So how do you create value? Well, people often ask me, well, you capture it, okay, now we understand you capture it, but what do you do with it? So as I said, we started out with fuels. What very few people know is that LanzaTech actually developed a second process called alcohol to jet that takes any source of sustainable ethanol and transforms it into sustainable aviation fuel. In 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, we spun that out into a company called LanzaJet, with investment from companies you probably can't see on the slide, but companies like British Airways, Virgin Atlantic, Shell, Mitsui, and others, which enabled us to build a biorefinery on the right-hand side there in Freedom Pines, Georgia, which will open up in January of next year. So that will be the first sustainable aviation fuel production at pilot scale, using sustainable ethanol as a feedstock. And on the left-hand side, to the point of this panel, which is real market examples, that's our CEO, Jennifer Holmgren, with Richard Branson, who's basically that flight, that Virgin Atlantic flight, was flown across from Orlando to London safely using LanzaTech's sustainable aviation fuel blended with traditional aviation fuel at ASTM standards of 50%. So I'm not talking about concepts. The technology's been developed, it's been scaled, and we're actually seeing applications in the market. A quick story before I get into chemicals, which is really my space. Most of you will have seen this. This is from the Nova Institute's Renewable Carbon Initiative, where they're trying to say all sources of renewable carbon, including bio-based, including CO2-based, and including recycled carbon, should be considered renewable carbon. To Mark's point earlier on, it's helpful to have simple language for narrative, especially with policymakers. So we find this very helpful. We're members of the Renewable Carbon Initiative. And some of you may not know, most people don't know, that there's 500 million tons of carbon in chemicals and derived materials. That's a lot of carbon. The bad news is, as you can see on this chart, that over 80% of that is still fossil-based. And that's bad news because people like you and I have been in this business for decades, and we've worked really hard, and so much technology, and so much IP, and so much funding, and to look at that and say, it's still 88% fossil. Now, the good news is, because there always has to be some good news after the bad news, is the future is looking very different, or at least the future has to look very different. And this is another chart from the Renewable Carbon Initiative. As you can see, that black bar, that is where we are today. So given the targets we're aware of for 2030 and 2050, big challenge. The good news is several options, no silver bullet, and if you look at the right-hand side there, I don't think we can take those numbers as absolutes. The point is there's going to be bio-based, there's going to be CO2-based, and there's going to be recycled materials. So that's good news. We have some choices. Here is just a quick overview of some of the market launches that have been made with our captured carbon. And as I said before, we were very surprised, but positively so, by global brands coming to us and asking us for more sustainable raw materials. It did not come from the chemical industry. It did not come from other players on the value chain. It came from the brands. And therefore, it moved quickly, because to the point of this panel, the brands are closest to the consumers. And I know we're going to hear from Kimberly-Clark and other people who are close to consumers. And this is where a difference can be made. We then, being a tiny player at the beginning of the value chain, had to actually build a value chain going across into these applications. So you're seeing home care products, fragrances, polyethylene bottles, packaging, textiles, which has been very exciting for us. People often ask, why do brands, and of course we have brand owners here on the panel, but why do brands want these products? Well, as you can see here, and I'm not going to go into them, they have very ambitious sustainability targets. And just to say, there's a lot of data that goes behind this. This is science-driven. We have 3 LCA engineers on site that do all the life cycle analyses for all the products. And a brand does not move to our carbon raw material solution, recycled carbon, unless the life cycle is at least as good as, if not better, than what they're using today, whatever that may be as a raw material. And then the other advantage for the brand is the story. We heard from Mark earlier on, storytelling. Good story to tell. So I'm going to click through these very quickly. This is just to show this is real. These are launches that have been made by global brands using recycled carbon from our technology. And as you will see also as I flick through them, they are using different claims, but just to point out again that all these claims are based on data, life cycle data, science. So this is an Adidas textiles launch. The previous one was a Gucci fragrance launch. This was the first textiles launch from Inditex, the largest global retailer. One of their brands is Zara. You probably know it. It's the high street brand. And what's interesting for us and myself, having been in the chemical industry for some time, is on the left-hand side, you see the label on the dresses in the high street store. They tell the story, the carbon story. So I'm going to come back to what Mark said earlier. It was so true. You need a good story. Obviously, it has to be a true story. It has to be well supported by data. But these black brands, in some cases, are telling our story collectively here, and in this particular case, our story. This is Craghoppers in the UK. If you actually buy the garment, and they're great, and look at the barcode, what you'll find is effectively the LanzaTech story on the barcode. This was on running for those of you who are runners or into sports. It's the use of ethylene vinyl acetate made with recycled carbon from our technology, and they just recently launched this month, in November, a new running collection called Pace, made with polyester fibers from recycled carbon. So just to say, for the future, we're not stopping there. We have to continue to innovate to survive. So ethanol was our first product. We already have developed the biocatalyst to produce isopropyl alcohol, which can be transformed, polymerized, dehydrated and polymerized to polypropylene, large markets for that, as well as acetone. So if you build a plant like the Acela plant I showed you in Ghent, you can change the biocatalyst to produce a different product. And this is a portfolio of about 100 different biocatalysts that have been developed by our synthetic biology team for different products, including products like monoethylene glycol for polyesters that are for the future. So in conclusion, we have a new carbon economy, distributed and circular, and we're going to use or try and use every source of waste as a feedstock. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Babette. That was quite impressive, and I think we all learned, or most of us will have learned a new vocabulary, carbon smart. Please come and join us, and on that note, I would like everybody who's on the panel to just come up, and maybe we'll have the ladies sort of every second seat, so Anna Maria, maybe take the second seat from Babette, and you also, Marie, here. So, now, ladies and gentlemen, you have been working, and I will introduce the panel in a second. Come up here, Frederick. Come, you have the bad seat next to me. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's have a very quick look before I introduce the panel at what you have said and where your priorities are to the question, and maybe we can have the answer, the word cloud that had been produced, and I will be sitting down in a second. Please forgive me if I walk over here. But we have one word in the center of it all, which is called regulation. I think that's definitely on our to-do list, and we will be talking about that. Just to quickly share, legislation to do with regulation, of course, cost of biomass, but cost of products is definitely something else. The word financing, please forgive us, we're not going to talk too much about that in this session because there is a dedicated stream, a theme where finance is being discussed, but of course it's an underlying issue. And awareness and education, ladies and gentlemen, is something that we want to go into depth with you again. Large-scale production, I think I would love to thank you all for having participated, for having given us all these notes, but I can assure you they were already part and parcel of our prep chats. And now let me just do a quick run through, and then I'll go in depth in the introduction. So I now have to sort my cards respectively. Bernard de Galembert is sitting next to Babette as director at CEFIC. I'm going to explain, or you're going to explain about what it is in a moment. We have Anna Maria Bravo. She is director of Public Affairs at International Flavors and Fragrances. Thank you very much for having arrived here just in time. Robert Mack is here, Government Relations for EMEA, Senior Director at Kimberly-Clark. Thank you very much for being here with us. From up north, we can greet Maria Gustafsson, Project Manager, and you are the lady for everything that's called standards. And we're going to talk about how important that is. Last but not least, serial entrepreneur, Frederick van Gansberger, CEO and founder of Futero in this case, but we're going to talk. Now, in my sequence, I have Anna Maria, I have you as the first person I'm going to ask, and we did talk a little bit beforehand. You considered yourself an innovation solutions provider. We're going to go into detail there, but of course, what does one do when one looks at what a person does? One goes to LinkedIn, and one of the last posts you actually had was saying, I'm so full of positive energy. I've just come back from this conference, and of course we're not going to mention it because it was another conference, but what made you, we're going to go into critical aspects in a moment, what made you so positive? What was the feeling that you could capture and bring back to Brussels?
Thank you for that, Conny, and apologies for being slightly late.
No, you weren't right.
I had a good reason. Good afternoon, everybody. So indeed, I think you're referring to this conference that Europa Bio organized called EFIP, and we're all part of the same family of the bioeconomy, so I'm comfortable referring to that other very good conference. And it's true that I came out of that conference feeling excited and inspired. I forget what I posted, I was on the train doing it. And it was really because I feel the winds are changing for the bioeconomy, for biotech, for biomanufacturing. And this is partly because I think for the first time we were hearing bioeconomy not only as a solution for sustainability challenges that we have, but we're also now connecting bioeconomy more and more with competitiveness, with resilience, because these are the bigger challenges that we're having globally. And also, there is an urgency that is giving a bigger boost to this. There's crises that are pushing for solutions. There's a global race. I think you referred to it, Babette, but other parts, there's regions in the world that are really having bold goals for this sector. And so we're seeing this pressure to succeed in this space. So all that is, of course, giving a big boost. And as was mentioned by Mark earlier from DGRTD, there is now biotech and biomanufacturing that are on the political agenda of the EU, and that's really exciting and an opportunity to connect it with the circular bioeconomy. So that's what got me excited. Also about the innovation that was happening in the conference, and us as an innovative company that develops ingredients that are bio-based as solutions across many industries. This is really an exciting time to be here.
Thank you very much. Also, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We have this agreement. We do shorter statements so that we can have a second round and then really get into Q&A. And there will be a microphone roving around. It's good, Frederick, you're sitting on my left side. You are 31 years, I'm sorry, I mean, like, of course, you started in kindergarten, in the business. You're also currently CEO of Galactic, Futero's parent company. So you have a lot of experience, but you also have a little bit of tummy ache. I think I saw the Director General of the Innovation DG sitting here in the first row for a while. Just assume he was still sitting there. What would you tell him?
Well, I would say that Europe is a champion to finance research, that's for sure. I think there is a lot of technology which has been developed in Europe. Europe is excellent in research and is unfortunately also excellent in regulation. That was your word. And I think that's where the problems come from. Why there is so little plant built in Europe and the majority built in China, US, Brazil, it's because of regulation. And I can explain that if you want later or now.
Well, a little bit, give us a hint.
Time,
yes,
yeah.
Yes.
So what we produce is a bioplastic made of lactic acid. It's a plastic which is biosourced and biodegradable. And this market has been developed during 20 years, very slowly, to fight against fossil-based products, so it took a long time, and now we have a market which is mainly worldwide in the single-use plastic device and in packaging. Europe has banned all the single-use plastic device without any difference between fossil-based and bio-based, where China made it mandatory to use bio-based, so that has created a market in China where we have closed the market in Europe. And now we have the PPWR in packaging, which has been created by the Commission first, with no difference between fossil-based and bio-based. So again, it's a risk for the bioplastic not to be able to grow in this market. And it has been passed to the Parliament, where the Parliament has opened a door for bio-based, and now the Council, with the Spanish presidency, has closed the door or pushed it to 6 years from now. So they don't want bio-based polymer in the packaging before 6 years, which means that this industry will develop in China, US, where President Biden said that in 20 years, 80% of the plastic must be bio-based. Europe, unfortunately, has a lot of creation, innovation, but not a champion to create market by regulation.
Thank you very much. I see a couple of people not there, and we're going to reverberate that and also sort of play the idea of you. So please chip in at any moment. But let me do my first, can I just, Babette, just one sentence. We've noticed that your biorefinery, or that your refinery is in China. Could that have been built in Europe? Yes. I think it's on. You just
Done,
trust
okay.
our Chinese.
Sorry, yes is the simple answer, and we get asked that question often, and it's very much for the same reasons that have just been stated. It's a shame. ArcelorMittal plant in Belgium was to be the first plant in the world. But it took us 3 years to get the words recycled carbon into the RED2. It then took ArcelorMittal 3 years to get the funding through the EIB loan, et cetera, et cetera. So while the legislation was enabling, the speed of action was very slow. So we were funded in 2015 by Horizon 2020. Where are we now? 2023, the plant will start up at the beginning of 2024. In the meantime, we'll have 4 plants in China.
Thank you very much. That wasn't a proper statement. That was just sort of, you know, just to compare. Robert Mack, EMEA Government Relations Senior Director, Kimberly-Clark, world player. I think anybody who's ever used any sanitary paper products will have sort of used some products by you, certainly if they've been traveling. And I still remember one particular wonderful ad with a tiny little puppy and some toilet rolls that were strewn everywhere. But, you know, this is the positive thing. What do you do with the stuff? I.e., sort of where is bio-based, where is the bioeconomy, and your products, how do you develop it, and where do you develop them?
Well, thank you very much. Maybe I should just give a quick introduction. So Kimberly-Clark, as you pointed out, is a personal care company. So what you referred to is sort of the tissue side of our business, which isn't what we're really, or I'm really here to talk about today, because where we have the challenge where the bioeconomy comes into play is on the personal care side of our business, where we make products that contain some plastic. So these are things like baby diapers or nappies, wipes, or period products or adult incontinence products, so those kind of things. And what we're trying to do, and I'm sorry if this is a bit of a graphic image, but our products, when used correctly, get dirtier from use, not cleaner. And so you get that mixed with human biological waste. And so, therefore, what we're very concerned about is the end of life and what happens to those products after they've been used by the consumer. They need to be properly recycled. And the traditional way of doing that is mechanical recycling, where you use a lot of water, you separate the materials, and then you recycle the individual components, whether it's a fiber or a plastic or what have you. What we believe is a better approach is the organic recycling, where you take a fully bio-based, biodegradable, and compostable absorbent hygiene product, say a diaper, and once it's been used, you put it together with the waste, the human waste that's been collected, into, say, the same bag as garden waste or food waste, and then it would go into organic recycling, whether that be anaerobic digestion or industrial composting. And so what we want is to have a fully organic circular product, and to do that, we have to use bio-based materials, bio-based polymers, innovative polymers, and that's where you get into some of the regulatory challenges, which maybe we can speak about in a few minutes.
Thank you very much. And also your company has ambitious goals. By 2030, 75% of the material will be either biodegradable or will be recovered and recycled. And of course, we all keep our fingers crossed that that is possible. With that in mind, maybe we'll talk about that in the second round. Let's go to Bernard Galembert. From now on, I just use Bernard, if you please. CEFIC is the European Chemical Industry Council. Now, we have, when we talk about the chemical industry in Europe, certainly the one in Germany, we have a big challenge. Workplaces are getting lost. I believe the total in Germany is a third from before COVID to now. That's a hell of a lot. Is the bio-based chemistry the savior of the industry in Europe?
Thank you.
You look rather frightened.
Looking first and commenting on the word cloud, I think having seen the word regulation guarantees a job for me for the remaining years. That's for sure, because indeed Biochem Europe and CEFIC are there to make sure that policy is designed in an appropriate way for the industry. Is the bioeconomy the savior? Possibly not fully, but possibly yes. The industry is ready, and to be honest, in the chemical industry, looking at figures supplied by Nova Institute, by the way, which seems to be the reference when it comes to data crunching, we are 5%, less than 5% of the volume of chemicals in Europe is bio-based. So there is ample room for growth on that front. And there are several reasons to make that move as well, because there is plenty of biomass in Europe as well. So when we speak, for example, strategic autonomy, rather than depending on imports, rather than depending on resources coming from overseas, let's use indeed, as LanzaTech is doing, let's use carbon, let's use waste, let's use domestic biomass, and there is a potential here in Europe. So from my perspective, indeed, bio-based chemistry is to grow. In Europe, there is potential in a series of segments where the growth is likely to be big. I'm thinking of paints, coatings, dyes, etc. I'm thinking of cosmetics care. I'm thinking, of course, of plastics, polymers, etc. So there is a serious potential. Of course, my job being mostly policy, that means also that I've seen some of the hurdles. We'll discuss that later on, but hurdles come mainly from policy, I would say, and from the need for certainty for businesses to grow into that business.
Thank you so much for that. And we're now going to take another angle, something that, gosh, the word standardization comes to mind from discussions like 20, 25 years ago when we were talking about innovation in the IT industry, that you needed sort of global standards. Of course, today we have them. 25 years is a hell of a long time. You personally, Maria, have been working on standardization for the last 15 years, but quite obviously it's doing you well. So let's talk about ingredients, processes, products that somehow need to be comparable, that somebody needs to be able to understand and maybe even compare. So how difficult is it, within Sweden, but also in Europe, to develop standards that everybody is nodding to? And I'm not quite sure, have you actually been talking to anyone who is sitting here on the panel on standards? Yes. I see that. Okay, fine. So please take it away.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, as Sweden is a small and export-dependent country, we develop very few national standards. We mainly work with European and global standards, and this is, and I'm here to talk about the formal standardization carried out in CEN and ISO. There are many nice certification schemes out there, but they follow their own processes. But standards can be an important and efficient tool for making things happen. If every company or every country were to find their own solutions and their own definitions, it would be time-consuming and it would be very big confusion in the marketplace. Because if everyone defined bio-based differently, it seems like an easy definition when you look at it, but it took some time to agree on exactly what it should look like. How do you measure the bio-based content and things like that, where you need to do it the same way. So standards focus very much on the how to do things. Is for the politicians and the market to decide on what and why, and we focus on how to do that. And I would also like to mention the need for standards to be ambitious enough to satisfy the need of consumers, and there was also talking about the brand owners and the drive coming from them to have things. And in order to gain the trust in a complex area, you need to have a good level of ambition, of course not too straining for the industry, but you need to have a good level of ambition so you gain the trust and can communicate clearly.
Thank you very much. I'd like to bring you in at this moment. You've collaborated in the true sense of the word. Why are standards so important to everybody, maybe also to the regulators?
Well, I think they're critical because like you say, if everybody goes and develops their own way of saying that they're sustainable, then we're going to get a lot of confusion. But it is a very challenging sector for the bio-based, because what a lot of the policies that are in place are looking at is the end product, and they don't recognize that how the product was made, and if it was made with a renewable carbon source versus a fossil carbon source. So there is a desperate need to look at the methodologies to really measure sustainability in a scientifically accurate way, and this is definitely a key role. So I have a lot to say, but you went like this to me, so I'll be quiet.
You can add one or more sentences. I'm just seeing that we're sort of almost getting through with our first round, and that actually brings me to the second round, which is going to touch upon one of the issues that we've heard. And ladies and gentlemen, get your phones out again, because we'd like to know your Slido answers to the question of how you would actually consider the need to educate customers, the pressure that customers then bring to you. The absolute wording is up there. Now that's an assumption, and when we had a pre-chat, all of you said yes, but not just customers, we need to do a bit more of education. So whilst you put in your answers, I'd like Babette to jump in here, because it was close to your heart that it is not just consumers, even though when we listen to you and your keynote, one of the big drivers seem to have been the big brands, which then, of course, they are looking at their consumers, at their customers, which are the consumers. So somehow consumers must be diffuse, but they are there with their wishes.
So I just wanted to say that we, as being a raw material supplier, do not pretend to be close to the consumers, because we're not. We're a tier 4 supplier. You know, we supply through a value chain that ultimately goes to a brand that formulates the product that then goes to a consumer. What I was saying is we were very fortunate in that we were approached by many global brands requesting recycled carbon solutions. So we had the technology, they had the consumers, and our assumption was and still is they understand consumers, and they're bringing that message back to us, which is we need sustainable solutions, and we have different ones here around the table. But I think I always think personally about this, like when we first started having bio-based foods. You know, there was a whole years of activity that went into what is that, is it really better? Yep. And then there was legislation, and then there was standardization, and then now you can actually zap the label to find out what's good and what's bad on your pack. So we should learn from these other industries. I think there's a huge amount of confusion around all these things. What does recycling mean? Is it good? Is it bad? What does bio mean? Yeah. Is it good? Is it bad? So there's no single solution here. We have to do all these things. But as Mark said earlier, I think the message was we need to get together, which is the purpose of the CBEJU and other organizations, to work together to find a common, strong, clear, simple narrative.
Thank you, Babette. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I just wanted to get the gentleman, Frederick Bernard, and maybe Robert, I don't know, but certainly the two of you have both mentioned it's not just the consumers that we need to educate, or that somehow need to have a broader knowledge base. I believe that some of the problems that you're facing right now, Frederick, would not be there was there more enlightened regulators. Let me put it nicely. Is that true?
Yeah, but I think if we start from the customer, we made a study and we saw that in our market, which is mainly packaging and textile, 86% of the people want bio-based. So I think everybody wants, everybody understands the global warming, so they want to do something, they want to act. So if the customer is ready, the brands are also ready. So it's just a question of regulation to give a push and allow the bio-based, which is not as competitive as the fossil base. And we have to be clear, it's more expensive, but it has some advantage. For example, in our world of the bioplastic is much easier to recycle than the fossil base, much more efficient, better yield, better cost, and so on. So, but you have to give a chance, and that's where the regulation has to come in place, and that's where Europe is doing just the opposite. That's why it's a pity. We have the customer, but not the regulation going with what the customer would like to have.
Thank you so much. Would you agree with that, customers are already sort of standing there and knocking on the door of industry and saying, we want your products?
I mean, again, CEFIC not being that close to the consumers, it's difficult to position myself on that front. But indeed, I think that, and Kimberly-Clark can definitely confirm that there are commitments by the brand owners, the fast-moving consumer goods companies, to improve sustainability, to improve the profile of the products they are putting on the market, and they play their role in educating the consumers on that front. Now, indeed, there is a response needed also from policymakers. I'm used to say that there's been here in Europe what I call the biofuel syndrome. Back in 2009, when the renewable energy policy was promoted, biofuels was part of the solution, was part of the package. And eventually it happened that the question of using biomass, food versus fuel, etc., came into the discussion, and all of a sudden what was bio turned to be devilish. And to a certain extent it did contaminate the whole bioeconomy beyond biofuels only. And I think that's what we need to redress now, and it's a challenge. And it's a challenge where we need to gain also the policymakers. Hopefully, with initiatives like the Green Claims proposal, hopefully with initiatives like the Empower Consumers proposal, there will be ways to avoid greenwashing and get into something that promotes a real, genuine bio-based products that comes up with the right features, with the performance that is needed by the consumers and that the market can offer. One additional element for me is the role that public buyers can play. And I think I want to bring here the public procurement issue, which is close to my and Anna's heart at least, is governments can play an exemplary role, like in the US, by showing a clear, explicit preference for bio-based products. And that will not only be exemplary vis-à-vis the consumers, but that will also create the level of scales or economies of scales for the bio-based businesses to grow and provide a critical mass, reduce costs, and therefore be more competitive vis-à-vis the fossil alternatives on the market.
Thank you. On the way to you three, and Robert, just hold your thought for a second. I would like to share with you your results of the word cloud, i.e. the result of this Slido questionnaire that we've made. Education, of course, is at the center. Stop greenwashing. That's also maybe a question of, you know, what is being said about products or an industry, and unique functionality, technology, neutrality, information campaigns. That would actually be sort of my entry into the question for you. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for the question. After this, it's your questions to our panel. Anna Maria and then Robert. Robert first, good. You hold your thought. You have held your thought, I hope.
Okay, yeah. Maybe I'll jump in and then I'll quickly hand it off to Anna Maria, who could probably add a few interesting thoughts. But I think we've really started to get to the crux of it between, you know, making products that respond to consumer needs and that also respond to environmental objectives. And what you have on this panel are a couple representatives of companies who are making very innovative technologies that help to do that. And then companies like us who want to try and use these innovative materials in final consumer products. And that's where you get into the challenge, because first of all, we don't have very clear and specific definitions about what is plastic and what is not a plastic. And again, coming back to your point, it seems kind of obvious, but yet it doesn't exist. And so we need to solve these very basic problems, because as all of you are trying to innovate and develop new materials which are basically giving the benefits of plasticity without the plastic, we need to be able to say, okay, yes, that polymer is not a plastic, that polymer is a plastic, and that one's not a plastic because it's fully bio-based, it's fully biodegradable, it meets a set of rigorous criteria or what have you, but we're not yet in a position to do that, and that's slowing down the pace of innovation. Then you take that and you match that against the consumer interest, okay? Right now, you know, consumers want products that are affordable, that perform, and that are sustainable. And when you do, there's a lot of sort of data out there that says, yes, consumers believe in sustainable products, and they want great sustainable products, but at the same time, if those products don't work very well or they aren't affordable, then all of a sudden the consumer interest in those products slides off significantly. And that's where you have to get that triangle, and you have to get that triangle right, and I think that's the real challenge, and that's why we need to be, you know, supporting innovation and innovative materials through clear regulation, because then that'll allow companies like us to make better products that meet a better standard, that still provide the consumer what they want, and that are also meet the environmental objective and are affordable. But doing all that without, you know, a clear regulatory framework is very, very challenging.
Thank you very much. Anna Maria, I now label you as a communicator, which you are at heart, certainly when one reads your bio. We've had a number of things at the center of which was education. The question is how? Like consumers are, in the end, positive about everything. Then I buy biodegradable plastics, for example, for bioproducts. And then the next moment I hear a radio report saying, oh, well, you shouldn't use that because it's going to take 30 years until it biodegrades. I hope that's the correct word. So the question is, even on the consumer side, there might be a sort of slight question mark. Yes, we believe, but then in detail, do we know? Does education help? How much education and maybe how? Probably that's half an hour's answer. So
yeah, and thank you for labeling me as a communicator. But indeed, what we do as advocates is we're communicating with the public authorities. So in that context, absolutely. I think here, we have to acknowledge this bio-based space is moving really fast. We're innovating very fast, and it is a challenge for the public authorities to keep up the regulations with the fast pace that we have, and that's our role in communicating. Education sometimes sounds condescending. I think here we need to play our role in that communication. Let me give you a great example. In our company, we have these biopolymers that we're developing as replacements, as alternatives for plastics in many applications. These biopolymers, they are identical to polymers that exist in nature. They're bio-based, they're biodegradable, so they meet all the sustainability expectations from a polymer that would be replacing plastics. We make them industrially because that's what our companies do, that's what the sector does. But somehow, unfortunately, the policy is recognizing them as a plastic. We talked about the Single-Use Plastics Directive, and just because they are made industrially, even if they're identical, they are called a plastic. So this is an example of communication where we spend our time trying to raise this issue to the Commission, saying this sector and companies like ours, we're going to increasingly start imitating the products that our consumers want, that our customers want, that are natural, that are more sustainable, that are innovative, but we need to have a policy space to allow these products to be recognized as such. So that is an education effort that we're doing. We're doing it through wonderful associations with partners in the marketplace, along the value chains. And it is difficult because then the question is, how do you transform that into policy? One thing is narratives, and I think that's really important, what was said about this. We do need to talk about narratives about this space, but we also need to translate that into policies, because otherwise we are spending hundreds of millions of euros into R&D, into manufacturing to make these products, but where are we going to do those? We have right now, we're about to make a decision if we're going to make our plant for these polymers in Europe or elsewhere? And these are the questions we ask. Narratives are good, but part of the education or the communication is really to talk about the opportunity, but what we need from a policy certainty perspective.
Thank you very much for that. I'm looking at you, but I'd like to already invite each and every one of you that has a question to the panel. It doesn't have to be now about consumers anymore. Any of the issues that you've mentioned at the beginning, I see, and I hope that our microphone ladies are there. I can't write it. I already have, yeah, perfect. The gentleman up there will also get the microphone, the lady here. Where's the second microphone? The second microphone is just on the way up to you, sir. So, madam, could you please start?
Thank you very much indeed. My name is Claire Scantleberry. I'm the Director General of Europa Bio, and it's been a super interesting panel. Thank you very much. We've talked a lot about what we know we need to achieve and what we need, and Anna Maria was right in that it's a very positive wind blowing really around biotechnology and biomanufacturing right now. I would ask the panel, let's look to the new European Commission and also to your member states. What would you ask them to achieve for biotechnology at the end, by the end of the next Commission mandate? And if this is very much a European and a member state question, because what can be created at European level can often be diluted or fragmented through very diverse 27 member states. So what would you achieve at the end of the next Commission?
Thank you very much for that question. I would love to hear your question as well, sir.
Hello, everybody. My name is Ralph Wares from CO2 BioClean. Great questions for the panel, and I'm going to be controversial. Why does it make sense to develop a lot of innovation in Europe and then have all the plants and everything produced in China, India, and America? Surely sustainability is making local resources, using local resources and doing that. And we're actually making PHA from CO2. We're capturing CO2 and making value-added products for some of you guys already aware of in the panel. Now, you know, for me, this can be a question of legislation, but it's more fundamental than that. If you take the American situation, I'm being asked by several companies in America to invest, you know, to sell licenses to these companies. The same in China. Not many people in Europe. I'm getting incredibly frustrated because, you know, we have so much legislation telling us how to do our plants, what we should do with our plants, and where to put them. And as I take cumbrance from a learned lady from LanzaTech. You know, she said the same problem. 3 years to take to talk to them. In the end, the plant ended up being in China. Now, quite honestly, if we took the American model and we took the Asian model, is it really all about legislation, or is it about government's commitment to really understand what the biopolymer industry has and what value in terms of jobs creating and in terms of you know, where we should be looking at doing that? Everyone in the panel has probably said something the same as what I'm saying, but you know, I think it's more fundamental. The government should really rise up and say, like in America, look guys, we've got a real opportunity here. Let's put some money behind it. Let's make sure the government pushes the money behind it. Then it will happen. I'm talking to so many different companies. Sorry, just let me finish. I've spoken to so many companies that want to develop with us in terms of solutions. It's not the technology or what we do. We're the most innovative area of the world. Give us the funding, make it happen, and it has to be through government pushing rather than legislation stopping.
Thank you very much for that statement. I think we can all endorse that. You will be able to answer. Can I just, for management, say, this would be my last round here on the panel, so great minds think alike. Thank you very much. Can we start off with answering this question about the dichotomy? And Frederick, I think you're the first to need to jump into that.
Maybe what I can already answer partly to your question, I think the first we have to educate in own countries are our politicians, because they don't understand. We have spent hours at the Commission, at the Parliament, now at the Council, with I mean, they don't understand. Even the ecologists, which should be supportive, They are not supportive. They don't understand the problem of this transition of bioeconomy. Yes, big figures, but when you start to be very precise and concrete, they don't understand or they misunderstand. To answer your question, I think we have said that Europe, of course, need to have the right regulation. We are not in line at all with that. And there is, of course, the risk. Europe doesn't like risk. China is eager to go faster, like in the US. So, of course, it always starts now mainly in China and in the US. Europe, even if we make more research on that topics, we start, and we are a good example. We did all our research in Europe, but we did our first plant in China. We hope to do the next one in Europe. It will not be Europe, it will be the US. And then, if I can just add one thing, we have another problem in Europe, is that, again, with regulation, we have created a taxonomy, and the taxonomy today block all the use of first-generation biomass, which is what you have to use to start your bioeconomy. You have plenty of cornfield in the US, same in China, Thailand, Brazil, everywhere. Europe, we are plenty of wheat and corn, but you can't use it. And if you go to the European Bank of Investment, they say, no, we don't finance you. You can't use the first-generation biomass. So you have no raw material, then that's another problem we are facing in Europe, and no financing from the European Bank of Investment.
Thank you very much. I said that there is a parallel session on finance, but of course, we can, of course, consider that here as well. It doesn't mean, because it's in a different session, that we should not touch upon it. I think Anna Maria is bursting to talk, and then it's you. Oh, you're now so
I'm
kind
a big
to each
mouth,
other.
so go ahead.
Okay, quickly, and I will keep my Christmas list for later, if we agree. But,
it is prompted already.
But the one thing which strikes me is, in fact, I've been using into a panel I was moderating some month ago the fabulous title, The Hare and the Turtle. And I think that's typically where we are. Europe has been the hare, starting very rapidly the bioeconomy race, and eventually, because of what I call the biofuel syndrome and others, the plastic syndrome, I could use the same, started asking questions to itself. Are we using biomass right? How is sustainable, or what is sustainable biomass? What about change, land use change? What about biodiversity? What about the real climate benefits? And all of a sudden we're stalling on that front simply because we ask these kind of questions, and we've put all investments and all the enabling conditions on hold because we're asking ourselves this kind of sophisticated question. Sorry to put it like that. When I call sophisticated, I go to the ancient Greeks, sophism, and the sex of angels. We can keep arguing for ages about this, but we no longer move. And it's about taking the risk at some point of moving ahead.
Thank you very much. Anna Maria, please.
I can't help it. I think here, to Claire's question, but also addressing the comments before, I think we're at a level that we need to have bold goals. So the US, for the bioeconomy, for biotech, they have a document, a report that's called Bold Goals for Biotech and Bioeconomy. And this is the sort of signal we're all asking for, saying it's time. It's time to get a boost to promote this sector, ask the right questions, but also advance and move it, and get a sense that we should be promoting this sector because it is part of the solution. It's not the only one, to Babette's comment, but we are at a time that we need that political boost for this sector to move to the next level. The technology's there, the consumers are asking for it, the brand companies are asking for it, and so I think we really need to get to that level. So what do we ask, what do we need in this mandate? It's really a dedicated policy for the bioeconomy that talks about market pull measures, that talks about how we're going to measure sustainability, the standards, but mostly to just acknowledge that innovation is going to be moving into this space quickly to provide these solutions, and we need to figure out a way to recognize the benefit of them. So I think it's an exciting time, but we really need that positive boost, and I think this biotech mandate in the next commission is going to give us, hopefully, give us that.
I really have set aside a quarter of an hour at the end, and I'd like you to also chip in with an answer from your side. Maria, from a Swedish point of view, and biomass, Sweden, forestry, easy association. We've had the biomass discussion, for example, you know, you can use old leftovers of trees, forgive me for being unscientific, and now, of course, a couple of ecologists look at it. You mentioned the word biodiversity. Of course, that has value to nature, which we may not have seen that much ago. So suddenly we have these sort of two arguments. Have you in Sweden come to an answer that would encourage a European solution?
Well, when it comes to the Swedish forest industry and the Swedish forest legislation, we have had two parallel goals for many years now. One is an environmental goal and one is a production goal, and they are both equal. Both should take the same priority to make sure that you can produce products from the wood in the forest while still taking care of the environment. There are some standards out there. Of course, everyone in the Swedish media, there's a very large debate about whether to use the forest or keep it as a carbon sink so you can get credits from it. Personally, I think that you need to find a good balance where you can use it. You improve the way you do it, of course, continuously. But you need to replace the fossils, and in Sweden, the Swedish bioeconomy rests on its forests, of course. So,
what happens when you meet in a company with your colleagues? You're responsible for EMEA, so there must be people responsible for Asia, for the US, or certainly for the Americas. Are they grinning at you and saying, "No wonder you've got 1 or 2 gray hairs"?
Well, hopefully I don't have too many gray hairs, but...
No, perfect. It looks wonderful.
Okay, thank you. But it is fair to say that within our company, in the circles of those of us who are focusing on policy and managing and engaging with policymakers, Europe is definitely on the cutting edge when it comes to regulating. Okay, they're definitely doing the most in terms of regulation. And that's... in some ways, that's a good thing, because I think if we were having another conversation about what are some of the things we need to be doing as a society, you know, to address climate change and address some of the other environmental challenges we face, there are probably some things that are happening in Europe that are a good thing. But I think it, as one of the people who spoke earlier said, you know, it's interesting that on the one hand, in this space, the policy is creating so much challenge to really innovate and get these innovations to market, whilst on the other hand, you know, DG Research has put so much money behind supporting and developing these innovations, and the general Green Deal goals that we're all striving for can actually be supported by these kinds of innovations. We can make products more circular, we can reduce waste, we can, you know, do all the things that we want to do, and we can also, these materials also have, they're low carbon materials compared to fossil fuel plastics. So not only are you dealing with climate in a positive way, you're also dealing with waste in a positive way. You're making products more circular. It really is a win-win-win if we can make the products the way the consumers want them and at a price they can afford to pay for them. And it all starts with having a simple, clear regulatory framework with a few clear definitions and getting that in place quickly, because as Anna Maria was saying and others have been saying, we have to make big decisions about investments, and these investments, once you've made the decision, it takes some time to implement them, to make the investments, to roll out the products, to establish the supply chains, everything that goes into making that final product available to the consumer. And we all have 2030 goals, and we're all aiming to do these things. And all of a sudden, it's 2024, and there's not that much time, to get all this stuff done. And so when you have a blockage like we do with some of these fundamental sort of regulatory and policy decisions, particularly around definitions and other things, we need to just address them as quickly as possible. I don't think we can overstate the urgency.
Thank you. I already have one microphone in the audience, and I'd like the microphone holder to come up here. Oh, Fantastic. Then you just need to lean forward, or you already have the microphone. Yes, this lady already has the microphone that I know of, and you already are the second taker. Okay, you need to share that in a moment. So your 3 statements or questions, please.
I have a question. Well, it's probably not an easy question, but
And sorry, quick.
my name Teresa Presas, and I'm with the Navigator company, which is a paper company and forest.
Thank you.
It's interesting, and I agree with most of the things you were saying. But the question, the first or the second question about how to get consumers to uptake these products. And the clear answer was education. But education is very vague. Education where? Education in schools, universities, education in the package, what is education? I mean, I think we've been talking about it for years, but what is it?
Perfect. I have already a taker, but can we please have all 3 questions? And maybe there's one, Madam.
So from my side, it's more of a comment than a question. My name is Caroline Bergou. I'm a business angel and a fundraiser. You were just reminding us that there was another session talking about fundraising. I left it because I was stunned to see that in the room there were actually just a couple of investors. So it looks like it's a community of people talking to themselves, but not necessarily really trying to answer the needs of the market. We also had a head of UNIC telling us that he was surprised that there was no commercial uptake for what he thought were bankable products. Well, I was not terribly surprised, because I think the starting point is really to align our funding mechanism to the needs of the market, the way we evaluate the projects, which is not currently done, which is why I would very much echo what the last 2 speakers said, Frédéric and the last gentleman, that the fundamental issue is that we have regulation drafted by people who don't understand the issues. And we have funding decisions, also in the public sector, but not just the public sector, also the private one, often made by people who don't understand these issues, the issues. And that's really the crux of the issue. That's the fundamental problem. And I think we all need to raise our bars dramatically if we are to meet the targets we have to meet. And as you're just reminding us, we have very, very, very little time left.
Thank you very much. And the gentleman in the front row.
Ed de Jong, Avantium. Maybe also more a command than a question, but I think 2 points. I mean, I really would like that the European Commission really adopts the Nova Institute kind of foresight of having fossil feedstock phased out by 2050. I mean, I know that this is a challenge, but then automatically, I mean, recycling cannot solve it all, so you need CO2 and biomass. And the second thing is, I would really like that sustainability would be equally applied to food and feed production. Because if you have that, then basically the biomass, what is produced, is sustainable or not. And if it is sustainable, it can be used for food, feed, and materials and fuels.
Thank you very much for that. So I have already seen that Robert is going to take the question about consumers and not just sort of this amorphous word, education.
Yes, thank you, Teresa, for the question. I think consumer products companies like Kimberly-Clark and others, we know how to sell our products. So I don't think, when you talk about convincing consumers to buy a product that has a certain benefit or whatever, leave that to the companies. What needs to happen and where we need to focus is creating an environment in which we can develop those products so that they have the sustainability benefit, so that they're affordable, and make those products available. And that's where it comes back to the regulation messages that we've been talking about. So I think we have to really crack that problem about the regulatory blockages to being able to develop products that are sustainable and affordable, and then once we can do that and we can make those good products, then the companies will go out and sell them, and the consumers will understand them and they will buy them, because they do have a fundamental interest in buying more sustainable products as long as they're also affordable and perform well.
Thank you very much. If you want, you can, but you don't have to, because we're going to go to the finance.
On the education side?
Yes.
I think it's the responsibility of everyone. So I agree, defining education is challenging, and I've seen some examples. Probably a year ago in the EU conference, or 2 years ago, there was a children book that had been developed by a EU-funded project to try tell the bioeconomy story. I think to a certain extent it was nice. Now, probably it starts there at school, but I think it's a shared responsibility educating, and the question is more, who should we educate first? And I think it goes probably back to what we were discussing before. It's about educating policymakers, and that's probably the role of associations like ours, the people doing advocacy, as well as the role of some of the companies.
I know that, Frederick, you're, let me say, a bit disappointed at the fact that you've tried to communicate for the last year and a half and didn't actually make your point in so much as they ignored it. Looking forward, not so much what's your consequence, but is there an alternative to trying to talk? And maybe, Babette, your experience would be lovely to share as well.
Yeah, I think we have talked to the different DG, to the parliament. Many, we had tens, if not hundreds, of meetings. When you speak with this political maker, we had some, we say, bioplastic, yeah, but in bioplastic there is plastic, so I don't like plastic, point, finished. That's the level of answer you have. So, I mean, how do you want to build from there? But and that's really the problem we are facing. The main problem we had, to be frank, is that when we speak about bioplastic, you have to explain that there is biosource and biodegradable. And of course, there was a trend to say, okay, let's make it biodegradable so there is no pollution in the ocean and blah, blah, blah. But I mean, the plastic doesn't, I mean, at least in Europe, there is very little plastic going to the sea. It's 0.something% of the overall plastic we find in the ocean is coming from Europe. So it's not the case. So we say, no, what is important for the global warming? It's the bio-based. This is what is important. But this is just that, try to explain the difference, take a long time.
Thank you very much. Babette, what's your experience in trying to communicate? Communication seems to be a large issue between, you know, this is what we want, these are our ideals. In Germany, we want to finish by 2054 in order to have everything phased out. In Europe 2050, we actually got to get a move on.
Well, I have to say I have to agree with everything that's been said, and thank you for all the questions and the comments and what Frédéric has said here. We don't have an answer because we've been doing what everyone else has been doing, trying to do it the way, I'm going to say, it's always been done, and that's perhaps not a good thing. But we have, as probably Futera have, gone and spoken to policymakers. We're parts of industry associations, talking to CEFIC, EFIB, everyone we can talk to, but we are, I think, clearly hearing here, we are not making the change we need to make. So I have a question, and perhaps we should brainstorm here. I mean, Frederick, you raised the question. You speak to them, you do all the things. We have people like Anna Maria in our organization, Greg Archer may be here. They're experts in advocacy. And yet, I think what we're saying here is we are not making the change we need to make. So is there a different way, maybe Anna Maria, as a professional public affairs person, not to put you on the spot, but what can we do differently? And I feel even in our case, where we're a small organization, we have one policy officer for the whole of Europe. How can one person, even with industry associations, even with, you know, all the collective needs we have, make a difference? So to come back to Mark's point earlier, he said to us, you need a collective narrative. That's right. How do we bring, I mean, obviously the CBEJU, CEFIC, Industry Association, CO2 value, but we're going to have to do better than we've done till now. I'm putting the onus on us. I don't know, Frederick, would you say something differently?
I heard one word that you were mentioning that...
I can give one element of answer. I think there are governments that are excellent Now, I would be advocating for my own government. I'm French. France has, under the leadership of President Macron, become the startup nation of Europe, I believe. Their government gets it. You have a 1-hour meeting with key people in Macron's team, and they get it, and they run with it. So, you know, you need to talk to the highest level with, and in Europe and also in Silicon Valley. The best civil servants I've ever seen, European civil servants, are in Silicon Valley. So this would be my 2 cents.
Okay, I have 2 people already as an answer. Anna Maria already starting, and then Robert, and then we're going to go into the final round. And no, we haven't forgotten the wish list.
Yeah, I think we need to look at this like, again, the urgency. We are in a crisis mode. We need to figure out a way to exchange views and have those discussions. Completely agree with you. It's not a technical discussion. It's a political discussion where you give a guidance. We are needing these things urgently. We need to move in a certain direction. I do want to give credit to DG Grow, who has been doing these great workshops with stakeholders. I think you're on the 3rd round, Kristen, I'm looking at you, 3rd or 4th. These are good places to discuss on very specific things. We want to talk about more. I would love to have one on biomass, which is the elephant in the room. How are we going to use the biomass for the bioeconomy? So I think more of these exchange platforms are really important, but what needs to be on top of that is that political direction. The person from DG RTD earlier today, he also was saying that they have realized that they have, quote unquote, failed at industrial policies that accompany the innovation. And he gave a couple of examples. And I think here what we're needing is a platform to work with the Commission, work with the member states to really explain until they get it. Again, it's very complicated, but that we get to a level that we can really push the right buttons and try to find a solution, bring in the NGOs, bring in the stakeholders, because we don't claim we have all the answers, but at least let's talk and let's move on to it and really look at what are the concrete things we need to resolve to move forward.
I have, and Robert, I note that you want to sort of answer that, but I have one combination of questions here, and I'm not even quite sure whether I can dare ask it. What do we need to make bio-based solutions the norm? Yes, if up to now the offerings of the market don't seem to be understood sufficiently, we will not get to a norm, or will we? But maybe, Robert, first of all, with your answer from earlier, maybe you can sort of slot in a tiny attempt at answering the question about the norm.
Yeah, I think the key point really that I wanted to make is that I think there's, you know, in the day, the gentleman from DG Research said, you need to have a common message. And I come to this event and I listen to everybody talking and I listen to the comments from the floor. I'd say we have a pretty common message. I mean, I think we all violently agree. I don't think that's the problem. I think the problem is connecting this message to the people who have the decision-making power. And I think that's where we need to focus our energy. And it's great to understand that DG Research, for example, hears our pain and wants to help with that. I think the question is then, what can you do practically to make that happen? And I'm no expert in how all these groups work, and there's others probably up here who know better than me. But my understanding is that DG Grow, which is pretty supportive, and DG Research is pretty supportive. They're part of the boards and whatnot. But there's no connection in those same bodies to DG Environment, which drives a lot of the regulation that is challenging. And so why don't we put them all together on the same boards and in the same groups, and they sit around the same tables and they hash through these problems and they get some agreements, and there should be some benchmarking and some, you know, in industry you have KPIs and you have, you know, you have to meet those. And so, you know, DG Research is investing these millions and millions of euros in all this stuff, and there should be constant focus on whether or not we're getting the right commercial results from that research. Is it generating what we expect it to generate? And if it's not, why not? And working together to find the solutions. And when you have some promising innovation that comes out of these programs, it should be an organized effort to shepherd it through so that it can, and help it and overcome every barrier so that it can be commercialized and made available to the public and drive the benefits, the environmental benefits and others that we need in society. And that's where I think the whole thing kind of breaks down a little bit.
Marie, have you, in building up agreement amongst different countries and governments on standards, would you be able to share sort of a methodology to maybe get to norms? Standards is one thing, it's sort of after the fact. Getting to norms is proactive. But can you share some of your experience that might help us find a solution?
Well, I think that a lot of things have been said already, but I think it's about having all the perspectives around the table and creating the right environment for the discussions. For example, in standardization, we work with consensus and we work with transparency, but in the end, the product, the document that comes out is a collaborative effort, so all the technical discussions are confidential, so you will never be quoted afterwards, which sort of means that you have a good discussion area. And also I would like to say that there are quite a few standards out there if you want to support bio-based that you can use as a basis. If more are needed, come talk to us. We will help you. Standardization is market-driven or policy-driven. At the moment, we are working on one standard to level the playing field between bio-based and fossil-based, and that is that when you do LCA comparisons today, many of them disadvantage bio-based, and this one is meant to level the playing field so that the comparisons get fair.
Is the development too fast for people to understand? Because a lot of what we're talking about technologically is new, is development of the last 20 years. Maybe the thinking behind that isn't, but the technologies that are there. Are we not capable of, I'm sorry, I'm trying to think along, are we not capable of thinking out of the box and fast, finding solutions for what we want?
I think generally in Europe, compared to the US, because again, this is what we know, in the US, there is a pro-innovation mindset in policymaking. In Europe, we are very much still thinking about the precautionary principle for the right reasons. And for that reason, sustainability is so important in European policy, which is great. But we need to strike the right balance between pro-innovation, pro-solutions, acknowledging we don't have the answers and we're not going to tick all the precautionary boxes, but at least we're advancing with the right infrastructure in place versus blocking everything because you're biodegradable, but you're not completely biodegradable. It's better than fossil. So we need to be looking at things in a much more pragmatic and solutions-oriented way.
Thank you very much for that. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we still have one quick question to you. Oh, quick question? Here. Okay, can we quickly get the microphone to you? And then I would like to, as the microphone is getting to you, I'd like you to already get out your microphones. Oh, and there's one up there already. Okay, fine. We're going to standardize our procedures tomorrow. But I think if the gentleman has already had the microphone, a quick question and a quick question to you, and then we're going to do the slider question. Sure. Please.
Hi, thanks. My name is Andres Comba. I work for Bioeconomy for Change, which is a bioeconomy cluster in France. I have a question regarding affordability, because he talks about performance, sustainability, and affordability. I share with it. And I think that affordability is an issue in many bio-based products. I don't remember the name of one of the speakers, but he works on the cosmetic industry, and I think it's the easiest or the most simple sector where you can sell more expensive bio-based products. But for example, LanzaTech, that is producing more intermediate molecules or commodity chemicals, maybe it is more hard to sell more expensive products. I would like to know how they are looking to tackle this issue, because a cosmetic industry will not change the world, I think so. This is my point of view. But maybe other chemicals can have a higher impact, and affordability is an issue.
Thank you very much for that. And the gentleman here in the third row.
Yeah, Herman Morris, Maastricht University, but with a 35 years of industry background. Are we not forgetting one elephant, actually, which is in the room, which is that the big chemical industry, materials industry, actually is not participating sufficiently. They know how to scale, but they are defending their own positions right now. And it can only work if we get to scale, because then the word affordability finally comes in.
Thank you very much. I think, Bernard, in a moment, after I've really put the Slido question, you can say the one sentence, because now, having had a little bit more time, we're running out of time. So the Slido question really is, which instrument or action is essential in bringing about support for industry to transition to bio-based solutions? And thank you very much for participating in this questionnaire again. One answer, one sentence.
I mean, difficult to comment when your members are both on the bio and on the petro side.
I actually think the two of you can have a chat afterwards. Is that okay?
The reality, as I said, is that growingly the fossil-based industry is aware that let's say renewable carbon in general will be the way forward. And because policy is anyway putting the pressure, so it's unavoidable. Whether it will take longer for some than for others, for sure, but that's a reality.
Thank you very much. Babette, half a sentence. You may or may not.
Difficult. No. Just on the point of affordability, because it's a very important one, I'm sorry, but I don't like that word. And you're right, there are some markets like fragrances or cosmetics which are higher value. I think we have to be much stricter with ourselves about explaining value. So this is a case where we're providing value in terms of sustainability, not economic value in the way typically is determined. But in any market, look at solar industry. They started up here, they went down here, they also went to China. The point is, until we get to scale, we're not going to be competitive economically. And for now, we bring benefit in terms of sustainability. So at least what we're trying, and I'm not saying that's the only solution, is we bring value, it's in the form of sustainability, it enables you to differentiate even in a commodity product like a fashion textile vis-a-vis your competitors. But we have to move then to scale quickly to carry on and go from niche to norm and build that volume. And that's when we need the supportive policies.
Thank you very much. I was trying to listen. I was trying to stage direct the microphone, because we're now going to go into the promised last round. And I did get your name as Claire. Okay, just very quickly, the question to Claire. Whilst you think about it, we are going to share the results of the Slido question. And can we have a quick look at that? I see that the word cloud has built up. EU political targets, well, the targets are there. It's just a question, what do we need to do about it? Disincentivize fossil industry. Thank you very much for that answer. Financing the gap, we have done that. International regulation, incentives. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Claire, you have 30 seconds to not to show all your wish list. You know, it's 12 days of Christmas, but you only have one wish. What would it be? And then we do it in the panel.
Well, in answer to my own question from earlier, I would say very clear goals that are also quantified. So we set ourselves quantified targets, a very clear pathway to get there, and an explanation and a clarification of all of the things that influence that. Because you are completely correct in that policymakers often don't understand what the impact of a decision will have. And so we have, for example, timescales for member states to approve things that have no time limit.
That
there are
was
lots
a
of things
rather long letter to Mr. Christmas. Nicolaus is today, which is important, I think, in Sweden, definitely in Belgium, definitely in Holland, and a little bit in Germany. So let's just assume Nicolaus is coming here. The one sentence in order to bring the industry forward. What is needed, and you can also take what is needed for the next Commission to do. Maybe Babette starting off. No, you don't want to start? Frederick, if you want to start, go ahead. One sentence.
We managed having targets for biofuels, for climate, etc. We need targets for the bioeconomy and binding targets. And aspiration is not good enough.
Thank you so much. Babette, you've had time to think.
Well, yes, I was going to say a EU commercial roadmap which recognizes not just the benefits of the technology, but the business rewards.
Thank you very much. Anna Maria, I know that you're going to be my last one, so Robert. Okay.
I would say, clear definitions and policies which are innovation friendly.
Thank you very much, Marie.
Well, I would hope for a good cooperation between the Commission and the standards body so that the Commission sets the targets and give us enough time to develop the standards to support it.
Thank you very much, Frederick.
I would say
you want to have one more year?
No. No, just make regulation to create market opportunities and not to kill the little market existing today.
Thank you very much. Anna Maria, the last person on the panel.
Thank you. I would ask the Commission to set up an initiative just like they did for the CBE, the BBI, the first one. It was addressing the valley of death in terms of taking the European innovation into commercialization. Now we need some sort of an initiative that really recognizes how we need to really put these products on the market from a policy or political targets. We need a bold and dedicated policy for the bioeconomy that really puts them out on the market, to your point. We somehow lose track of that.
Thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, can I say thank you very much for participating in all the Slido questions that we've put up. Thank you very much for all your valuable contributions from the auditorium. And could you just chip in one more time? Could you give the fantastic panel a big round of applause? Don't run away, give me just half a minute, and all I wanted to say is whatever you do in Brussels tonight, do enjoy it, and tomorrow morning, as from 9 o'clock, we're going to be thinking again, we're going to be discussing again on this theme or in the other two tracks that are running parallel, and everybody who is working or part of the staff of CBE, please stay in this room. Everybody else is released. Enjoy your evening. Thank you very much. And again, it was a pleasure. Thank you.